Hi my loves, it's Monica again, and I'm here with another reading recap video for the months of May to August of 2021. If you saw my first video for the books of January through April, you know I read 12 books. These past 4 months, May to August, I read half that. If we don't include the book that I DNF'd, which I will talk about in this video, but it's just been a very odd 4 months for me. I got a new job, so I've been transitioning, into that. I'm moving soon. As you can see, my bookshelf is very much different and I have boxes. So I'm moving soon, so hopefully that's been like a 2-month long process where like all of my stuff has been in boxes for like a month. But hopefully the next video that I make, I will be in my new apartment and either fully set up or halfway set up of how I want it to look. So because I am in this process of moving, of the 6 books that I read, 3 of them are packed up and 3 of them are here. I don't have any ebooks for this time because the only ebook that I read was the DNF, but for the books that I don't physically have access to, because I don't know which box behind me they're in, or if they're in one of the boxes that are in the living room, I have pictures of their covers and I'll show them on my tablet. Downloaded these. I thought they'd go to my photos. No, they're sitting in my documents on my tablet. And I'm like, hello, you're a photo. So the first book that I read between May and August is Hillbilly Elegy, a memoir of a family and culture in crisis. And this was by J.D. Vance. This is a autobiography of, the hillbillies in, I believe it's Appalachia. Did I write it down? Yeah, they're in Appalachia, the Appalachian Mountains. Just kind of showing how his life differed from, the people in his neighborhoods and how similar they were as well, and to how different it was when he went into, bigger cities, and a lot of the issues and trials that people within that community often go through. I did like a lot of the times that he did mention, while I am a white man, this affects people of color in a completely different light. So it was essentially like, take my message with a grain of salt. Like, this is, my family. This is how most white families were. So he wasn't trying to like overshadow, that of black families and black stories. At least that's how I took it. If you read it in a different way, let me know, because I am but a white woman, so sometimes I don't see those subtleties or perhaps more microaggressions that are prevalent in a lot of writing. So let me know if I happen to miss anything if you read this book and read it differently. I did find though, with his view of, white, his views were a lot white-sided, within politics. So if you tell me that I missed something, I'm not gonna be shocked. I also do have to say, JD did join the Marines, and I feel like one of the reasons he did join the Marines, kind of mentioned in the book, is that, it paid for his education. And, he eventually went on to, earn a law degree. I think he went to Yale. Did you go to Yale? I didn't write that down. But I feel like it essentially, the Marines only targeted him because of his poorness, like they do in a lot of lower income and of color neighborhoods. A lot of the time they will focus on those neighborhoods and those kids because lack of, resources and funding, and say, hey, we'll pay for this. And so it's just a little targety for me. I gave Hillbilly Elegy 3.5 stars. I'm not big on autobiographies or things like that, but it was definitely an interesting read to see the different lives of people in different areas, and how, JD, because it was his book, how he would try and hide that side of him when he was in, higher class neighborhoods or things like that. And one of the examples he gives is when he's at a dinner while he's at law school, and he doesn't know what any of the different utensils are for. And so he calls his then girlfriend at the time, I forget if they were dating at that time, like when he went to the bathroom, he's like, what is all this? He didn't know what sparkling water was. So I thought that was just kind of interesting. The next book that I read between May and August of 2021 is A Song of Race and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown. And if you have not heard of this book, it is a West African inspired fantasy of a young princess named Karina who is struggling to essentially rule her kingdom while there are people that are trying to kill her, and she's trying to figure out, you know, who's after her, essentially. As a very almost dumbed down explanation of this book. I wish I had the physical book so I could read you the summary, because I'm so very sorry for the terrible summary I just gave. I would classify it as a high fantasy because even though it is heavily inspired, you know, by West African culture, it definitely did feel like its own, you know, world, almost like Middle Earth or whatever world is in here. I have not read this book yet. It terrifies me. Look at the size of it. But it did pull off of real world, but I felt just entranced and as if I went into, you know, another magical place. And, you know, that's just, you know, props to Brown's writing and talent as an author to pull me in like that. I thought something that was really funny, this isn't a spoiler, so I'll say it. The three siblings, Layla, Malik, and Nadia, I thought it was very funny that their names, the first letter of their names also went in order of like their age. So Layla is the oldest, her name starts with L, and then Malik, M, middle, and then Nadia, N, the youngest. I just thought that that was, you know, kind of clever. I don't know if that was something that Roseanne did intentionally, but I found it kind of funny. Also, if I'm pronouncing any of these names wrong, because the only time I've seen the name M-I-L-I-K, it's been pronounced Malik, but if it's Malik, please let me know. I probably should have done research on how to pronounce these names. I really should have. That's on me. One big thing that I liked about this book was how they handled depression, anxiety. You can see in, you know, scenes, Tunde, how he gave Malik a rubber band to put on his wrist and snap it, you know, when he was feeling anxious, which is a very common trick, you know, used in today's world. And Malik's mantra of breathe, stay present, stay here, you know, when he's having an attack to kind of calm himself down. And also with Karina's, you know, fear and her headaches, you know, resulting from, you know, her past trauma with the fire as well. Someone who struggles with anxiety and also has depression. I really liked seeing that and, you know, feeling validated in my experiences with that. One thing in this book that I feel might be different, it might just be different from the type of books that I've read, but I felt like our protagonist, you know, Karina, she didn't win essentially in this book at all. You know, a lot of times when there's multiple books in a series, whether it's a duology or trilogy, even in the first book, your protagonist will win some sort of battle, but it's not like the full war that they've won yet, because that's not the overarching arc, but like the little arc within the story. She doesn't necessarily win that, and in the end, she's essentially running away from her home to protect herself and to come back fighting. And so I really like that it shows that she's not always gonna win, because you can't always win. There were two similar quotes toward the end of the book that had to do with strength and fear that I really liked, so I'm going to read them. The first one is, oh goodness, I think one is said by Afua and the other is said by Hyena. Oh, I wish I had my book. But the first one goes, I don't think you're weak for being scared. I don't think you could be as strong as you are if you weren't. And the next quote, you know, along those same lines are, do not underestimate the strength it takes to be kind in a world as cruel as ours. And that rings true in like a lot of societies. You know, the life is cruel, but it does take strength to be kind, whether to yourself or to others around you. A warning for the Song of Race and Ruin, there is some animal death in it, as well as actual death. There is, you know, decent descriptions of blood. It didn't trigger me as much, but I know that it can trigger others, so I wanted to let people know that ahead of time before they read it if they haven't yet. But in A Song of Race and Ruins, there is a trigger warning at the beginning of the book. There is a page saying, that talks about anxiety, death, animal death, things like that. I gave A Song of Race and Ruin 5 stars. I really loved it. It was so beautiful. I loved the magic world. I loved the lineage of Karina and her family, as well as, the different cultures melding together and how they worked. And I am very excited for the next book to be released. I don't know when. I think it's later this year. I could be wrong. It could have already been released. I've been kind of bad with keeping up with book releases. The third book that I read between May and August of 2021 is The Last Time I'll Write About You by Donna Lanuza. This is a book of poetry, which I do not read a lot of poetry. I'm in possession of more poetry books now than I was last year, so I will be starting to read more poetry, but it's just never really had a pull towards me. However, even though this book was more of a poetry book telling the story of the end and loss of a relationship, a romantic one, a lot of the poems in this book had me relating it to my own relationships within my family or my friends. The losses that I've had in some of those relationships lately, and I found myself getting very teary-eyed at some of them. If you do read this or you have read this, the poem titled Root, that one very heavily makes me think of someone who I've essentially recently lost in my life. I'm not going to say who it is just because that's my business. One line that she has in one of her poems, it's the one titled Lesson. It is, forgetting is just another form of remembering, because in order to forget something, you have to try and actively not remember something. And that hurts, to actively force yourself to stop thinking of something, whether it's a happy memory or a sad memory, because it has a certain person attached to it, and since you don't want to let them go. And I don't want to let go of my person or some of the people that I've lost, but I know that eventually I truly will have to, just depending on our situations, and it hurts me a lot. So I'm still essentially learning that lesson, that forgetting is another form of remembering. I gave The Last Time I'll Write About You 4 stars. I was not able to really attach myself to the romantic parts of this book. One day I might, so I'll read this book again if I ever need to. It was a wonderful way for me to kind of start reading more poetry books and bring that into my life. Alright, let's see if I can get the title to stay up for longer than a few seconds. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go to my first video where I try and talk to you about the novella that I read off my tablet. But here's the book that I DNF'd or did not finish. Is it going to pop up, or is it just going to pop up with the pages? We'll see in a sec. Or in 3 years. Oh. It popped up where I left off. Alright, so Wolves of the Northern Rift by John Messenger. This book I got off of BookBub. If you don't know what BookBub is, it is an online subscription that will send you discounted or free ebook deals either once a day, once a week, twice a week, however you set your preferences to. And you can also select the genres of books that you like and what device you read them on. And so I got that off of this. I normally only go for the ones that are free, just because I tell myself, oh, if I get myself a free ebook, it doesn't count. It doesn't count. It doesn't, but it does. It counts. And that's why my TBR is so long, because I have so many ebooks that I just, download for free, because I'm like, oh, it doesn't count. I did not finish Wolves of the Northern Rift. I also got it because it had a steampunk element to it. It did have magical elements, and I am very interested in steampunk. I want to read more books with it. I love the aesthetic of that. But while reading this, there was just not a lot of steampunk elements, at least to my liking, for a novel that, says it heavily centers around. If you look at the cover has gears on it, and the woman on the cover does wear, you know, I think it's called a jabbet, you know, the thing on their neck that has gears on it. Her wrist cuffs have gears. Within the book, you know, there was Zeppelin and, you know, the top hat, as well as the cane worn by the main character. And I just felt like those were really the only steampunk elements that were present in the novel. And I made it to chapter 26. I really tried to push myself through this book because I was like, maybe it'll get better. And it just really didn't. There was also just, I felt really off with the main characters, especially Simon. Simon gave me kind of racist vibes, like he was racist. And one of the biggest things in this book was this town is being terrorized by werewolves, and the werewolves happen to actually be this like ancient native tribe that live outside the city walls. And they call them abominations. And I know they call them abominations because they turn into werewolves, but it just did not sit right with me. I read, you know, the character that called them abominations, and I just put my tablet down. I was like, don't call them that. That's not okay. I got really weird vibes from all the characters. The one character, I guess, that I was interested in the whole time was Luther, because he had some weird demon magic, but it didn't interest me enough to keep reading. There was also some weird line about a virgin. I don't remember the exact line because I didn't want to write it down, but I did not like the line. Like it was obviously demeaning toward women, so I didn't write it down. And then there was a line where someone was like, you complain like a woman. And I was like, yes. If I did have to rate this book, and I did rate it on my Goodreads just so I could put a review, I gave it 2 stars just because I felt the premise was there. It did have a good storyline. It just was not executed correctly, or in my opinion, well. So maybe one day I'll give it another shot. Probably not. It's my first DNF book for this year, and I'm gonna try and allow myself to just be more critical of books and to DNF them if I don't like them, because there are some books that I've read all the way through and I'm like, you know, why did I do this to myself? So if you're ever looking at my reviews on the Storygraph or Goodreads, if I give it 2 stars or less, it's most likely a book I should have DNF'd. And if I didn't DNF it, I either pushed myself all the way through it, or it was a book for school that I had to read, so I couldn't DNF it, because I had teachers that would look at, you know, Spark Notes and things like that to make sure that their questions weren't something you could find on Spark Notes. So you had to read the book. Didn't stop me from not reading some of them, but whatever. If I could fight some of my old teachers for the books that they made us read and questions and the times they've made me cry. So the 4th book that I read, you know, all the way through, it's one of the 3 physical books that I do actually have. A Blade So Black by L.L. McKinney. And this is a retelling of Alice in Wonderland, where Alice is actually a, what is she called? A dreamwalker? Yeah, she's a dreamwalker, and she fights the nightmares that live within Wonderland and can sometimes sneak out and attack humans. So she fights them with her muchness and swords. Magic swords that harness her muchness. And suddenly someone is coming for her mentor. They have to search for ancient relics that were hidden after, you know, the split within Wonderland. She also has to deal with real world things. So her mother, who grounds her, I think maybe 3 times during the course of this book, because Alice keeps, you know, lying, getting out of the house when she's not supposed to, sneaking out. I'm pretty sure she got grounded for putting the meat in the microwave to de-thaw it as well, because apparently it's not good to de-thaw meat in the microwave. But that's how I de-thaw my ground beef. I'm sorry. This is book 1 of the Nightmareverse, so I am very excited to get my hands on the next book, which is A Dream So Dark, and then the next book after that. I did give this book 4.5 stars. Nothing bad about the book. It's only when certain lines would be said, and it was more of like high schooler lines, so you know, the way that high schoolers talk, or depending on when was this book written. I may be about to roast myself. So this book was written when I was in college, so it had a lot of the language that high schoolers are saying when I was in high school and when I left high school. And so that kind of like was jarring a little bit because most of the stories that I've read don't have that connection still to the real world where they are actively still living in it. A lot of the times, if the books that I read where they start in the real world, they just go into the fantasy world and they stay there for the entire time. So there's not a lot of that, real world slang in the book. So there is slang, there is AAVE. So it essentially threw me because I've never seen that in my fantasy books before. And that's also probably because my reading has not been that diverse since starting now, that I have a little bit more money that I can spend on books and not always get books for free or extremely cheap. So it was just a little jarring, but I did like it because it did, fit in with the characters. A warning for A Blade So Black is that in the beginning of the book, there is a shooting of an unarmed black teen. Her name is Brion, and she does play a little bit into, the end of the book as well, because the nightmares within Wonderland feeds off the energies from both, places where things happen as well as people's emotions while they're actively, emoting them. Another part in this that was similar with A Song of Race and Ruins was that Alice doesn't necessarily win in this book. The book essentially ends with they almost have nothing to defeat essentially the Dark Knight or the Black Knight, in his quest. And a quote from the beginning that her mother says, that her mother did say off of the shooting of Brion, was that even when you're careful, even when you follow the rules, it might not be enough. And that definitely rings true for Alice and her friends and their fight against, the evil in this book. It just was not enough to win at the end, this story. So the fifth book that I read between May and August of 2021 is Le Petit Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, a very, very well-known French book. I do have to say that I did not read this at all until right now, and I took French for 8 years. I majored in French in college, and the fact that I never read this book yet, to me, is shocking because so many people, talk about this book, and it is heavily used in French education, whether it's in French classes in America or, classes just in France or even Canada. Because this is really my first French book since graduating from college, I tried to read it with just my normal playlist, in the background. And my normal playlist while I'm reading is just instrumental songs or a lot of songs by Lindsey Stirling because there are no lyrics. So it's just music that just goes straight into the back of my mind where I can just focus on the words here. But I found that it just wasn't working for me that way. And it was hard for me to connect myself with the story. So what I did do is I found a audio recording of somebody reading, this exact edition. And I had that in my ears and I read along, which is a lot of the times how I would read in high school and sometimes in college. And I found myself understanding the book so much better, hearing the words in my ear. And so that might be a reason why some of the times when I had to read in college, I just couldn't get it. I have to hear it. So, sorry, madame. A lot of this book is essentially accepting your inner child. You don't have to go towards those adult careers if you don't want to. You can 100% do what you want. Like in the beginning, the narrator, he wanted to draw. He drew a snake, who ate an elephant, and then the second drawing is he ate an elephant, but it was a diagram showing the elephant inside, and people were like, oh, do adulty careers, do adult things. But this book was saying, hey, you don't have to do adult things to be an adult. In the sense of you don't have to do an office job. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to be a doctor to be an adult. Those typical adult jobs. You can be an artist. You can be whatever you have those passions for as a child. And you can still be an adult, and you can be a damn good one. Books, that is a form of art, and people make a damn good life off of it. I mean, people buy their book. I felt, you know, one of the parts that showed that was when Le Petit Prince talks about, you know, the rose and how he's responsible for his rose. To me, that was almost like the rose is your inner child, and you have to protect your inner child so that they don't vanish. Because if you lose that, you know, sort of inner child, you lose your happiness in life. And as someone with trauma, I've never let go of my inner child, but I have hid them. I'm starting to let them out a little bit more, you know, every single day. And we're getting along great so far. One quote in this that, you know, kind of summed up adults that just didn't accept their inner child or didn't go towards their passions and more toward what they thought other people would want is les grands passants sont très étranges. Big people are very strange. And they are, because a lot of times, you know, they don't smile, things like that. And from the eyes of a child, that's just so strange. Like, why aren't you smiling? Why aren't you happy? You know, you have a job. Aren't you happy in your job? Don't you like it? And a lot of times they're like, well, I have my job. I like making the money, but it's not their passion. I gave Le Petit Prince a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was a wonderful little book to me that just said it's okay to let out your inner child, to be yourself. And obviously it was written potentially for more, you know, younger audiences, to let them know that they can keep inner child or just stay, you know, with their passions for the rest of their life. Maybe I'll get this in English just to see how different I feel towards the book reading it in English, because for some reason I feel like some of the translations might not fully carry over, but that could be me. So the last book that I read between May and August of 2021 is actually a book that I won in a giveaway, and it is an advanced reader's copy or advanced reader's edition of Pax Journey Home, which is the sequel to Pax, a book that I read earlier this year. It is in my first video, and Pax follows a young boy, Peter, as he has to essentially give away his pet fox when his father goes to war, and the journey of those two coming together. And Pax Journey Home is a continuation of that story, but it shows how different both Pax and Peter have become since they met again in the forest at the end of the first book. And it deals with grief and guilt and a little bit of found family, showing that family doesn't have to mean blood. I am recording this book on September 7th, and that is the release date for this book, so by the time this video is out, you can go out and you can get Pax. Pax Journey Home. I am going to buy an official copy, because one thing that I was sad about, but it didn't take away from my enjoyment, is that none of the illustrations were permanent, so there weren't any illustrations in the book as I read, except for this one in the beginning that said art not final. And one of the things that I loved so much with Pax was the artwork, and it is the same illustrator, John Klassen. So I definitely want to get a copy of that and, you know, see the artwork, and also just to compare quotes, because it did say that some quotes may be different in the finalized copy, and just to check on those. And then I can always update my reviews on Goodreads and the Storygraph with what quotes stayed the same and what quotes were slightly different, and if they still held meaning the same way for me. I gave Pax Journey Home 5 stars just because I really loved it. It still had, you know, those effects from war. One of the big effects here was that there was a group of people trying to fix the water supply in the area, as it was so damaged from the bombs that had went off. So showing more of that effect of humans in war on the world and the environment, and trying to fix that and take care of the world, because affecting the animals, it was affecting people. So another great book to also read with kids, you know, right after Pax, showing that war has an effect. So those were the 6 books and the 1 book I did not finish between May and August of 2021. So half the books that I read between January and April, but I am hoping to either double the number or just read more than 6 books between September and December. Of my reading goal, I am at 18 books out of 16, so I have surpassed my reading goal for the year, which I'm very excited for. My pages goal, I'm at 6,040 pages out of 8,000 pages, so I am close to completing that goal. My average rating for the year is 4.28 stars, so it changed just slightly from the last time I did one of these videos, because I do tend to give high ratings because I tend to only read books that I either know I'm going to like or I plan to like. Due to me moving, the only books that I still have out, so these ones, are the ones that I am planning on reading this year, and then I did spend money on myself the other day and I got 2 books that I have been eyeing for a while, which is The Bone Witch by Rin Chupico. I'm so very sorry, Rin, if I mispronounced your name. As well as The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. Right now I am reading 1 physical book and 1 ebook. I have The Vampire's Doll and The Last Orphans right now. So once it comes toward the end of December, probably the beginning of January, so I can have the exact number, I will chat about those, see if I like them or not. But let me know if you read any of the books that I have in the last 4 months. Let's chat about them, and let me know if there are any other books that you think that I should read. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!